It's 7 o'clock. You're live with Tony and Nicki. And tonight we are talking about the rather over talked about subject, I guess. But we were going to do it last Saturday, but actually we were busy last Saturday, so we had to miss Saturday out. But yeah, we wanted to talk about the Harry and Meghan situation from the viewpoint of not getting into any judgment, who's right, who's wrong, but to look at it from the perspective of, what's happening in this relationship. Because look, it's a very public relationship, obviously, and we've taken apart many relationships in the past when they're in the public eye, and things aren't working out so well for the people. Just so that we could actually have the potential to have a bit of a learning from ourselves, because obviously it's often easy to see what other people are doing, but very difficult to see what you're doing that's not working. So, what have you got to say for yourself,
hello.
Mrs.
Sorry,
B?
just getting lined up on the old Facebook chat box, so that if you have any comments, any questions, any thoughts that you've got about the whole Harry and Meghan situation, and as Tony said, just to reiterate from the girls' point of view, I suppose that it is interesting. Maybe I could even go as far as to say every girl wants to be a princess.
Of course.
And maybe in this situation, well, yes, how would you know?
It's got a bit of a downside to it, hasn't it?
And actually, I think what we're wanting to do tonight is use this as an example of how couples struggle, whether they're, you couldn't be more extreme, could you not? Either, normal, ordinary people like us, or the royal family and people that marry into the royal family. So it almost goes to show, I think, that so many times over the years, haven't we, honey, we've been coaching people who are really struggling in every part of their lives, and they see that, say for example they're struggling with money, they see that as, oh, if only had money, all our relationship problems and all our life problems would be okay. And then we've also worked with some people who have got so much money, and I think we talked about it last week a bit, didn't we, or the week before, when we said that they had loads of money, loads of all the benefits of being, very successful, or as tonight we'll be talking about, like being in the royal family. The problems are still the same.
Yeah.
And what Tony, you said to me, didn't you, this evening, you said so often it's because we haven't got back to basics and to look at what it is that causes relationships to go wrong. And you might be thinking, well, it doesn't seem to be anything wrong with Harry and Meghan's relationship. Well, actually, if there wasn't something wrong with their relationship, then I don't think they'd be in the situation they are now.
Yes, no, I agree. So, yeah, as I said at the beginning, perhaps early on before anyone got here, it's not about taking sides or being in judgment. Let everybody else do that. I mean, bless them, they've been absolutely hammered to bits across social media and stuff like that, which, is the very thing they don't want. But obviously it's the very thing that they seem to be experiencing, which is a bit of an irony. I think the thing we're looking at tonight is we're looking at what patterns can we see? Because, as I said, it's often easy to see in others, especially when they're in the public eye, when it's not so easy to see when things are going on for ourselves. So,
I was just thinking as well, which is really interesting. So I'm just saying to the people on Facebook, what do you think? Tell us what you think, and we can start to answer your questions right from get-go. But it made me think that as we see, because they're so in the public eye, aren't they? But look at it. When The Crown first came out, there was all like, overtones about the Queen and them, in their younger married lives. Then there's always been Charles and Diana, and then there's Charles and Camilla, and then there was Andrew and Fergie, and there's always been. And it's the same with the, like people in entertainment or music or football, or we've been talking about this for years now. Every time something comes on the news, we have a bit of a chat about it. So that's what it is.
Yeah. So basically, if you're not aware of the Tony Nicki stuff too much, our relationship philosophy, then what we thought we'd do is we'd try and look at it through the eyes of the relationship philosophy. So it's a learning for everyone in it. And the first philosophy, if you're not familiar with our stuff, is we call it the red and the green world. So what's the difference between the red and the green world? Well, look, we live with a sort of what I often describe as an awareness, a level of awareness of ourselves, life, the way it is. And I often describe it as if we have a low level of awareness, then it's a bit like having like blinkers on. It's like we're looking at the world through blinkers, like the blinkers they put on a horse. And we only see what we see through the blinkers and make that to be the only thing there is. So we don't realize there's stuff going on outside of the blinkers because we got them tight on. And so the red world would be where somebody's very tight on their blinkers, and the green world starts to be, as you take the blinkers off, you start to see things that you otherwise wouldn't have seen. So this is known as our level of awareness. Sometimes it's called our level of consciousness. Now, somebody with the blinkers on tends to have different patterns of behavior than somebody who has their blinkers off. So if we put a sort of a dividing line between the red and the green world, the people that are operating in the red, for most part, are completely unconscious of this, that there is a red or a green world. So they're in the red, but they don't know about the green. So they're just doing what they're doing, having the experience that they're having. So, but what's interesting is they have various traits, which no matter, where you live on planet, if you're a human being, then there's very few human beings that won't run those traits. Now, so that has nothing to do with where you come from, how much money you've got. It doesn't have anything to do with any of that. This is your sort of level of consciousness, yeah? And some of this comes from the work of Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote this great book called Power versus Force, which I'm often banging on about, because it explains in there the different sort of places where if you've got the blinkers on, like if you're here, you'll be doing or experiencing this, or what happens if they're here, what happens if they're here. So you can see that where you are. Look, the only reason for looking at any of this is really to see where we are. So that's the magic of personal development, spiritual development. If you're having things happen in your life where your life is not working for you, which is what I'm getting their experience is when it's not working, then what they tend to do, what people tend to do when they're in the more red world, is they attempt to control the outside world. So one of my first questions is have you noticed, as you observe the couple and the people around them and the whole situation, have you noticed anybody trying, should we call it, I like the word trying in this context, to control the others? So if a person is looking to control something outside of themselves, or in particular other people, then that is a more red behavior. So often when we're doing talks, I often say, so who here likes being controlled? Well, people look at me as I'm completely mental and go, well, I don't like being controlled. So nobody ever puts their hand up. But I always say, well, so what's the truth? Have you ever, or are you right now in any way, shape or form trying or attempting in any way to control other people or situations and circumstances that are feeling uncomfortable to you? So, it's a good question. What have you noticed that from a control viewpoint? What do you notice? Have you noticed anybody trying to control anybody in this situation? So it's not really about the people. What have you noticed about the way that they're trying to control, if indeed you're noticing anybody trying to control? So it's not about the names or the personalities or anything like that. What do you notice that people, if you're noticing it, are trying to control?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some answers to what
Fantastic.
I asked the question, what do you think about this? So it may not be that it's come through yet as there. So first of all, Julie's saying being out of judgment, of course, is what you're saying. When you've got the blinkers on, you're not even being able to see that other people are doing the best they can. I find it interesting, just thinking about what you were just saying. I find it interesting how in any situation like this, my observation is that this would not be the situation anybody would be having if they were in a good place within themselves.
No,
So
well,
it's a bit
that's
sort of
very
like,
true.
I'm trying to control so that I get something for myself, or I'm trying to control, to use that word, because I'm somehow not in a good enough space about where my life is, whatever that means, and therefore I am expecting someone else to act differently. So Julie's saying being out of judgment is obviously the
That's
first
magical,
thing.
yeah.
I look at it as shining a torch in nooks and crannies for everyone. I think that's a great way of putting it. It's like we watch them, and we actually didn't watch the interview, but there's been so much in the press about it, and obviously people have been talking about it and the snippets that we've seen. Actually, one of the things we've seen, which has been amazing, is how many people have made jokes out of it on some of the social media, which is very sad, really. But actually, it's meant that we've watched it without watching it. But Julie's saying, imagine if you watch it, rather than watch it and be in judgment, have it shine a light on you. Because I was thinking, like, when you were just saying that about about being in control, only in, I'm just hold my hand up, because this is a good way of looking at it. Hold my hand up. If I'm going to shine a light on myself, I go, it's only when I'm not in a good state that I am going to be trying to control you. I'm not, if I'm in a good state, Tony's, free to do whatever he wants to do, and we have a lovely time. If I'm not in a good state, I'm trying to get him to behave in a certain way. So Julie's saying that. She's also saying, plus how much we continually filter through what's impacted us individually. I'm going to pop in that word.
Yeah,
in
so
the
I think
past.
that's really great, because obviously historically, talking about patterns is a great point, Julie. If indeed you are in any way, shape, or form trying to control another person, then generally speaking, you're sort of going, yeah, this person's doing something that I don't like, so I need to stop them doing that because it's not making me feel good. And I don't like not feeling good. So please, can you stop doing that to me? Now, there's various guises of doing that, but I just, encourage you to go, yeah, so am I noticing any of that going on? And if you are, then basically it's really, that is what the more red part of you will do. It will sort of, in a way, do what it's always done. So generally there's an edge to the pattern. So, for example, and Julie's absolutely right, if you're running a pattern today where you're trying to control somebody because something's going on inside you, which is most commonly some sort of emotionality. In other words, you're feeling emotionally not good. And when you're in the more red world, that's the unaware world, then what you want to do is you don't want to feel that feeling. So what we do is we push the feeling down, and then we attempt to stop what we think is causing us to have that feeling, so that we stop having the feeling. So now the challenge with that is it's all good. It's just human behavior when you've got your blinkers fully on. But the sad thing is, of course, that it doesn't work. And so this is very interesting just to see with their patterns that they're running on all sides of the situation. Are people doing things, saying things where they're trying to get the other person to stop doing something that they don't like, that's making them feel bad? So now play that back on yourself. Have you ever been in a relationship situation where it's not going well, you're not feeling good about it? So what you do is you try to stop the other person or people. Because look, this is a bit of a situation with the parents, So if you think about it, we've always got a generation situation, because with the royal family, you've really got like 4 generations going on here, haven't you? You've got the elders, who are the Queen and Philip, of course, and then you've got Charles. He's the next generation, sorry, and then of course you've got Harry and William, and then you've got their children. So you've got 4 generations. Now, it's also very interesting to think about, if you do notice your pattern, it'd be great if from this you're going, so when I've had a situation, I can see how I might have tried to get somebody to stop doing that to me. So just think about, if you want to share what that was, that's great. Type away, and then ask yourself, so when I look to control them or stop them doing that, how well did that work? Like, you could give it a score out of 10. 10 would be, oh my God, it worked brilliantly, they stopped doing it. Or 0 is, they didn't stop doing it at all. They kept doing it. Yeah. Because what tends to happen is, as you make it their fault, this is the problem with the red world when we're very closed down. I always call it's a bit like EastEnders or Coronation Street or those sorts of things, where these situations are happening all the time. Yeah. And of course, the TV people love it because they know that it gets people's attention. So whenever anybody's got a bit of a, it's a bit like school. I don't know if I went to a bit of a rough school when I was young, and if ever there was a fight in the playground, what happened? Everybody gather round and they want to see what's going on. Yeah, we're like nosy, aren't we? We want to know what's happening. So
well, that is actually very true. We didn't have fights at our school, actually.
Oh, well, it was always happening at our school.
But my point is that everybody's the observer, and you're absolutely right. The most beneficial thing we can do is say, look, I'm observing this and what's going on with this family, but let's see what I can learn from it about human behavior. And then, as you say, be really, really honest and go, what do I do? Am I drawn to drama? For example, I think that's an interesting word to bring in here, because there is a lot of drama around it. I just wanted to read out what Sophie said, because I was asking Sophie what she thought. And she said, I also think everyone is so quick to say that she's a narcissist, etc., and blame her. And and Harry is coming away from this with clean hands and public pity. It's crazy. I understand their position of just wanting to be together without the pantomime, especially with the Diana thing, etc. I do believe it was a controlling environment, but could Harry really not get any answers? So honestly, what you've done, Sophie, is actually bring us very, very quickly to the next part of what we talk about in intimate relationships. And that is what Tony's explained about the red and the green, meaning, are you in a good place, or are you in a green good place, or are you in a bad place where literally whatever you do, nothing seems to work. But now we've come on to the pink and the blue, which is the masculine and feminine, which Tony will go into in more detail in a minute. But just to point that out, of course, I agree with you, Sophie. That was the first thing I saw. I saw, a lot of what was being said, rather than I don't want to go into what was being said, but what was being said, I felt like saying, there was a lot of time I was going, well, what was Harry doing? What was Harry? What is he? I mean, what we would say is, what is he, a man or a mouse? Was he, because of his upbringing, of course, this is why there is no blame, because of his upbringing, maybe he was not able as a man to find a way to look after Meghan in that situation in this country with the royal family, so that they did feel like they had to go away and be somewhere else. But of course, the interesting thing, Sophie, of what you've said is that if that was the case, and that's sort of understandable, and we'll come back to more in a minute about how a masculine and feminine couple are best to interact with each other regardless of what the rest of the family are saying. What's interesting is that if he was not able to, as he called it, protect her in this country, and so they went away, and I think a lot of people are saying, so they went away and that's all good, so why did they need to do, the interview about, and, get all they call it dirty washing out in public? And I think that one of the things, and I actually do find myself being quite neutral on this subject, which is quite useful, I suppose, because we're talking about it. But I see the royal family. I see how they might struggle with the situation they're in, which is not normal. And then you see people who come into the royal family, like the people who marry into it, finding it really, really difficult. But actually, if you look at each individual, and Sophie, I think you're right. Harry will have been affected by what happened with his mother. Meghan will have been affected by what happened with her family. Charles would be affected by how he was, affected by his upbringing. And you could take any person in any family and just look at their upbringing and say, rightly or wrongly, however negative or positive their upbringing is, they are affected. And I think what basically Tony was just saying is we tend to replicate our childhood experiences and patterns. And it's only when we stand as the observer and look at it that we realize actually this is the same. And so I actually do believe, bless her, I really do feel for Meghan in some ways, is that she's not only, I mean, obviously she was super famous anyway with Suits and stuff, but like then of course she's coming to the English royal family or the British royal family, and she's had trouble with her own family, you know, and that may not be anything like her fault, which is why fault and blame is irrelevant, which is why the best way to look at it is to look at the individuals and see how, bless them, each person is struggling. So I don't know whether you, Tone, want to go on to talk a bit more about the pink
so
and the blue, because
I think
that's quite useful.
You know, the key thing when a relationship's not working, we never start with the pink and the blue, the masculine and feminine, but there are lots of giveaways in that. But the reason we're not healthy, should we call it, in the pink and the blue, in other words, our masculine and feminine energy in ourself is slightly out of balance. And when we meet somebody else, what we tend to do is meet somebody else who's equally out of balance. So now you've got two people out of balance in terms of their male-female energy. And of course, that has a massive effect on the way they operate. Now, that is why we never go into the pink and the blue before, although everybody wants us to, before we talk about the red and the green. Because the problem is you bring your red and your green is all about your energy and what you bring to the party as a human, as an individual, you know, with these blinkers on. The more blinkered you are, the lower your energy and the more negative emotionality that you bring to the party. So whatever you were brought up experiencing negatively, you carry that. It's like a burden. You know, I remember Richard Wilkins, the great Richard Wilkins, you know, talking about, you know, when we come into a relationship, we've collected up over the years all of our stuff, our negative stuff, and we sort of collect it, he always calls it, in a metaphorical bin liner, yeah? And then we sort of like carry that bin liner with all our stuff, our old baggage from past relationships, our childhood, and even previous lives, if you want to throw that in, if you believe that. That's all the baggage that you bring into a relationship. And of course, when you first get into a relationship, he always said that you put your baggage down and pretend you haven't got any. So that's why when we get into a relationship, like their relationship looks all amazing, and you know, you can hear them talk about how amazing it was for them when they first met, how they really clicked and what have you. But of course, what they've done is, like everybody else, they've put their baggage down. They're ignoring all that. And then, of course, they're walking into a hornet's nest of, you know, life in the public eye, which, you know, basically magnifies all of your problems in your external world by a multitude. And in their case, you know, it's an extra multitude because of the family that we're talking about. So
can I just say so, because I think just going on from that, it's interesting. So Sophie is saying, oh sorry, where is she saying it? Oh yeah, she's going, question mark, was Harry being controlled by Meghan, or did he take control? Interesting. And I've just written here, just to, because I think that there's a school of thought. I just can't remember who it is now. There's one of the, you know, gurus, whatever, one of the people that write a lot about, you know, our patterns that come from our childhood or our programming or whatever. And I can't remember whether it's Louise Hay or whether it's NLP, but there is one philosophy that says that there are a number of what they call control patterns. In other words, it isn't like being controlling is just say that person's being controlling or that person's being controlling. It's like everybody does a different,
of course,
controlling pattern. And I have a feeling it was with Louise Hay, whether it's an NLP thing, I don't know, but it was almost like, I remember it, that it was about the family dynamics, which is relevant here, of course, a family dynamics exercise that we did. And there was the 4 different types. And it was all with the hand movements. Do you remember? And it was like this. The one was the interrogator, which was like, you know, why do you do that? And blah blah blah. But it had this hand movement going to it. Then there was the pleader, there was the person who was like, oh no, come on, or all need to get on really, really well. Then there was the irrelevant, the person went, oh well, it's all too, burr, like that. That was the thing. And the fourth one, let me just think what it was actually the aggressor, which was this hand movement for certainty is actually quite a good hand movement. It's like a come on now, but this was in like an aggressive way. It was like, no, I'm right, you're wrong, kind of thing. And there was those four, and they call them, interestingly, that we've been talking about, Matt, they call them control patterns. And what I was just saying here was, I'm not sure any of the control issues are a he or a she issue. I think we all run our control patterns from programming. They say there are many different, and they're each different for each individual, and they will have been learnt.
Of course, yeah. So the thing is that when you're in the red world, we're all doing it. We're all doing it. So that's why it's good to look at them and go, yeah, okay, so what pattern are they running? But look, the trick is to go, yeah, do I do any of that? Have I done any of that? Who am I trying to control now? If I am, maybe when we've gone more green, we just don't do it anymore. But the problem is, the more you do it, then the ramifications or the consequences of doing that are huge. And here's why, before we do the pink and the bluey sort of stuff,
yes,
is because that when you run a pattern that is trying to control someone else, what effectively we're doing is we're in what we tend to call it the blame game. So in a sense, the way the red U operates when it's very closed down is you're sort of going, look, it's not my fault. It's nothing to do with me. It's when we look to control them, what we're really saying is it's your fault. It's your fault. Now, the thing is, like, another one of my favorite questions in seminars is, who here, pop your hand up if you like being wrong. And of course, no one puts a hand up that says they like being controlled. So look, we know other people don't like being controlled, but we still attempt to do it. Yeah. So we're doing it. Now, what we're doing is really saying it's your fault. But look, if no one puts a hand up about liking being wrong, then effectively what we're seeing is a person going, well, it's not my fault. It must be your fault. Yeah. Because when you go into that, you're defending and justifying why it's got nothing to do with you, but everything to do with them. Now, of course, when they hear that, I mean, think about it. Have you ever been blamed? I mean, forget whether you've blamed others, but feel what it feels like, or notice what it feels like when somebody blames you. What do? Well, you'll tend to, and this is the standard defense pattern, of which, as Nicki said, there's several different ones. There's probably loads of different ones, but there are some very key ones. But the number one is to defend yourself, go, oh, it's nothing to do with me. And then you justify by attacking the other person back. So you get into this blame game. So I'd encourage you to go, right, okay, as I look at this, is there a blame game going on? Because if there's a blame game, in other words, they're defending themselves and going, I think it's you. But what does the other person do? Go, well, sorry, if it's not me, it's got to be you. Are we seeing any of that? Now, if we are noticing that, then you have to have more compassion, because what most people do when they see that, it's like, as I said, the fight in the playground. If you go and look at the fight but don't do anything about it, there's no learning, is it? And what you tend to do is you go on one side or the other. Well, if that's your friend, you'll go and protect your friend, whether they're, good, bad, right or wrong, start the fight, whatever's going on. Your more natural instinct from a more red position is to take sides.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, as soon as you take sides, you're in the argument. Yeah. Because what you do, if we listen to ourselves, and if you listen to so many of the comments going on in the media and all of that, it's so interesting, because the number one thing you'll see is people blaming the other side, or just they go on one side and then they hold a position where they believe they're right, but of course that inadvertently makes the other person wrong. So that's why the red and the green is so important. So I'd be asking you, so if the green is to look at yourself and take responsibility for what you're experiencing, as opposed to going, it's happening
Yes.
to me. If you're in it, the
Yes.
it's happening to me mode, and you try and stop it happening to you, it's never going to end. There is no end to it.
Which
really.
actually probably before we get onto the masculine, feminine, the pink and the blue, is probably the most contentious thing that we could say about this whole subject. Brace yourselves. Is that when we start saying you're wrong, and we start blaming, somebody starts to blame whatever you say about what was said, somebody's blaming somebody for something. Now every time you blame somebody, that creates you to be a victim. Absolutely. And the problem with being the victim is you will then, your whole belief system, just Sophie's just replied here, which is so great that she said, because she was just saying maybe they feel the best way not to repeat history was to literally make a massive change and leave the country and all that sort of thing. But the difficulty is they haven't just gone away and found a new life. They have decided to go public on what they didn't like have happened, which actually places them both in a victim situation.
Absolutely.
And Sophie's gone, however, unless they work on themselves and reprogram their belief systems, which is what we're saying. So if we feel like a victim of somebody else's behavior, however bad or good or whatever they've done, right, we feel the victim of it, then unless we can find a way to reprogram that belief, we are always going to feel like the victim of it.
Absolutely. So that's why whenever this is sort of seemingly happening to you, the gift is to be able to look at yourself. But that is the most difficult thing to do, because it's the thing that you're part of you, the red part of you, the more egoic part of you, will not want to do. It has great difficulty looking at itself. And that's why you can forget all the masculine and feminine stuff in reality, whilst we can talk about that and definitely go, yeah, there's some of that going on as well. The reason that the out of kilter pink and blue, the masculine and feminine happens, is because we're not in a healthy place within ourselves. So we're running, as Nicki said, a victim pattern. Now, if indeed any victim pattern is being run by anybody in the argument, but if you're in a defensive position, if you're taking a defensive position and you're defending and then justifying your behavior, then you are taking the position of the victim. Now, if victims start arguing who's right and who's wrong, there is no end to that. It's very, very difficult. And the hatchet, is out, and it doesn't get buried easily because there's no forgiveness from that space. There is no forgiveness.
No. And so many people, sorry to interrupt you, so many people, if they get into that state, then it will lower their vibration. Sorry to go out there, but it'll really have them feel very like everything happens to me, which is what they feel. And therefore, it's most difficult place to get out of.
Absolutely.
Because forgiveness doesn't live there, coming out, changing your beliefs. And what Sophie said, which is absolutely brilliant, is she was saying about them having to get away, and then she said, but if they don't reprogram their belief systems, it will 100% follow them no matter where they go.
You can't escape it. You can't
whatever relationship they're in, it'll follow them.
It's brilliant. Well done, Sophie. Yeah, it's good awareness. Now, obviously, the greatest awareness is then to play that back on ourselves and go, so am I still doing that? Am I doing that in any way? Because it's a great realization to have. And of course, if you're not, then that's fantastic. That then is a brilliant time to get into a relationship with somebody else who's not doing that. Yeah. Or because all the time we're in those sort of what we tend to, it sounds a bit out there. When we're in those lower energies, or two blinker people are living together, doing the blame game, whether they're doing it as a couple, throwing it at somebody else, or whether that somebody else is so-called doing it to them. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the backlash of them doing what they chose to do has been unbelievable. So, for example, so
a great comment.
The more you try to prevent something happening to you by controlling people and saying, "Can you stop doing that to me?" the more it will happen until you look at yourself. So what I've noticed, like on social media, is scary, absolutely scary, because the one thing I noticed them really not wanting to have happen is to keep being judged, keep being, talked about negatively. This was the bit that was she's finding very, very difficult. And look, if we were in the public eye and people are saying horrible things about you, you are going to, potentially find that difficult to just let that go and live a normal life. But the challenge is, if you want to fight that in public, then you run the risk of making it worse. It's like putting petrol on the bonfire. The very thing that you don't want to have happen, if you don't work on yourself and have that experience of going, right, okay, I can see what I'm doing to stop it. So, and then go and try and control, then literally you're throwing petrol on the bonfire, and more of what you don't want is going to come flying at you faster than you can say Jack Robbins.
So we've got loads and loads of comments.
Come on.
That's absolutely wonderful. Julie Barker's going, I'd like, it's like we say in coaching, the presenting problem is never the real problem. Sophie, I'm now realizing who Sophie is. Sophie's going, you just said, well done, Sophie. She said, yes, I always listened to Nikki when I was doing her hair. It's Sophie B who used to do my hair.
Fantastic.
Sophie B.
We need your hair. We need
you. I need you,
look,
Sophie B.
Look. Anyway, we're loving this new look. We're loving this new look.
Anyway, but then Sophie said, if you were coaching them, where would you begin?
Okay,
so
Amber,
question. I'm going to come back to your comment in a minute because that's absolutely brilliant. But where would we begin?
Okay, so my first thing is we would ask them, and actually this is what we do when we're working with a couple. The first thing we would do, so let's imagine them sitting down, and we're like relationship coaches, and it would be a Friday evening because we always start on a Friday evening, yeah. And we always have something to eat first, so we'd have a bit of something to eat, get to know each other, get into rapport, and then what we do is
even more importantly, watch them.
Yeah, so in that
listen to them and watch them.
We're just chatting.
All will be revealed.
We're all
20
just
minutes.
chatting, and we're having a bit of food, and maybe sometimes we have a bit of a drink as well because that loosens them up. Although we're not drinking at the moment, we're on coconut water tonight.
We weren't drinking when we went to the last couple.
No, that's
true. Then we were.
Yeah, that's true. Because sometimes you have to go to be in rapport.
Yeah,
so anyway,
terrible job, but somebody has to.
So then the first thing we do is we get our flip chart out because we're a bit old-fashioned. We don't use PowerPoint or anything like that. Work. I don't even like PowerPoint. But anyway, we take our flip chart and our pens, and we've got our 4 colours. Yeah, and then we ask them what do they want to get from spending time with us. And then we basically we always put a heart in the middle of the board, and we always say, men, you have to go first. So we'd be asking Harry, look, mate, what are you? Sorry, we probably wouldn't say mate.
You
but anyway,
probably would, knowing you.
Do. Anyway,
Harry, you take it without the H. Harry, mate.
Well, it's not Harry. What's his name? Redknapp, is it? It's Prince Harry. So I'd have to be good with me H's because I'm from Croydon. We don't mention H's. Yeah. So anyway, and then we'd sort of ask him, so what's not working? What do you want to get from spending some time with us? And then we literally, keep going and find out what's not working for him. So what do you think he might put on the board? What do you think's not working for him in this relationship? Well, all I know is it probably would take us about an hour, and we'd probably get 10 or a dozen things out on the board that are actually he's finding really difficult right now. It's nothing to do with her. We're talking to him, going, what's not working for you? What's going on that you want to improve? Yeah.
It's that fantastic question which always floors people because they don't imagine that we're going to ask anything like that. They think we're going to talk about the problems they've got between them or whatever. And it's the question where you'd go to Harry and I'd go to Megan probably or whatever, and we'd ask on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being your needs as a man or needs as a woman are not being met in any way in this relationship, and 10 is your needs as a man or a woman are being met at a very high level. What's the truth? And so often somebody might be having a good relationship. I use the word good, very generalistically, but actually they may not be having their needs met. And of course, when people then go, we've had this happened a lot, haven't we? Where they've gone, well, actually, we're here with you, Tony and Nikki, because we want to get our relationship back on track or get the spark back or whatever they say, or stop, fighting or whatever it is. But they'll go, well, yeah, actually, maybe I don't get my needs met, which is why we're fighting. and like people
Yeah, I
find
think
that very
in their
interesting.
case, of course, you know, it seems like they're quite together in this. But of course, what he might be
But
writing
then
on the board is,
so one of them might be
but what
being giving in. So
yeah.
let's, for
But I'm just saying,
example,
one of the things he
say
might,
that he is very funny enough. I've got to read this because it's so perfect.
yeah,
So Amber, the amazing Amber,
fantastic.
says it looks to me like Harry is very loyal to Meghan. So think
Mm.
about that. This is why I wanted to just read it. And part of that loyalty seems to have manifested as supporting her view of the world, that she is the eternal victim. I mean, that's quite strong language coming from Amber Fallon, but I love it. But basically saying, well, maybe he's supporting her because she does feel like she's having the raw end of the stick here.
Mm.
But you see then, and sadly, Amber's saying, this loyalty to her has become so extreme that he's now, and she's calling it, thrown the rest of his family under the bus. Because what made me think about that, and why I wanted to read Amber's comment, which not everybody's going to agree with that, is that what could be happening is, yes, their relationship might seem to be working because she's feeling bad about things that have been happening and he's supporting her, but he might be actually not really wanting to do what they did. For example, maybe he might have gone, well, I feel like I really want to support you, but I wish you hadn't said what you said. So he's having to, the word I was trying to think of was compromise.
Yes.
He's compromising. So therefore his needs as a man may not have been met, even though he's very supportive. Very supportive.
I mean, if we ask them the score,
just an example,
he might, if we ask the score of how he believes their relationship's going, he might give a really high score.
Yeah.
But my guess is that a lot of his, bless him, his challenges is the disconnect from his family, because obviously, you know, look, it is what it is. So anyway, we can only surmise, and it's not necessarily, we'd be in judgment if we started to go, well, what would he put on there?
Yes.
But look, you know, it would be very interesting, because look, they're definitely having some problems, yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it. So it would be interesting to know what we put on the board. Now, she would be observing while he's putting that on the board, and we'd definitely be asking a few 0 to 10 questions and get it all out. And we always encourage them.
What do you argue about? What's challenging? What's changed? Because sometimes people come to us, don't they? Because, well, a bit like them, something's changed and all of a sudden something else has been thrown in. By the way, having a child, one of the biggest things that can throw an absolute spanner in the works of a relationship.
Yeah, of course.
So this could be absolutely nothing to do, like Julie was saying, sometimes the presenting problem is not the real problem. This can be something to do with the fact that they were doing really well as a couple, a man and a woman, and all of a sudden now they've got a little one. Like many, many, many couples, now all of a sudden your life has changed.
Well, there's three of them.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
There's 3 of
I'm
them
just
now,
saying,
and we've got a 4th one on the way. So, you know, we've got lots going on. But anyway, that's what we would do, and we would definitely be encouraging him to go to a place of truth. Yes. Because look, we always go, look,
well, and her, of course,
yeah, but she's only observing on the first stage of what we would do. So, but we would be encouraging him to go, right, okay, look, if you really want to experience love here, love inside of you, for everything that's going on around you, which they're not experiencing, is what we would look and see, then we need to go to a place of truth, because truth and love sort of hold hands, yeah? So we'd been, you know, digging deep to get him to get truth out on the board, and then we'd do the same with her. And then we'd ask her lots of questions and see if we can get out of them, you know, what's important for them to get from this time with us.
And sometimes what comes out, which is actually quite interesting, Sophie said, well, you know, I reckon Harry feels that he couldn't protect his mom, and so he's going above and beyond. Often what will come out, even in that early stage of a conversation with a couple, would be like that he might actually say, well, you know, I felt, you know, like I've missed my mom, so now she's in some ways like a substitute for that. And that can be really very interesting conversation for both of them, because it's like he might be trying to get from her a different type of commitment to him because, bless him, of what happened where he lost his own mother.
Yeah.
Now, so nobody's wrong. It's just that
But
what we want to
what-
do is get underneath
But
it and
that's
find
why
out
what
what's
we
happening.
do is we get out on the board. What's his challenge? What he's finding challenging. Now, I would guess some of what he put on the board would be stuff that's outside of him. So because he's had that experience, of a lifetime being in a royal family like that, you're having a lot of external experiences which you can't control when people write things about you. So it would be very interesting to know what he put on the board. But from that position, of course, you can start to see how he operates and the patterns that he'd be running, that then we'd look to help him look at himself to see what he could do to not have the experiences that he doesn't want to have. Yeah. So then you do the same with her. That all takes a couple of hours. Yeah. And then, there's a bit of coaching happens in there, because as they start to say certain things, we bring up little bits of like, okay, so.
Yeah. Just give you an example. So
Yeah.
Sophie's just said she believes that this is what obviously Sophie's observing it and believes something, which is absolutely fine. Her needs are being met defo, she's saying definite. I wonder whether he actually feels he's the one giving everything up, even if he won't admit it. So you might find, if we were coaching them, that he might be willing to say, which he may not have said to her, because what happens when people are together and they're having a conversation about something which is very difficult to talk about, it's his family, it's her, and it's the baby and all that sort of thing. But actually what we do is we create a safe space where they can tell each other the truth. So for example, he might say, let's just say for example, like, well, I do feel like I've given up. I kind of knew what would happen if I decided to let go of my royal duties. I knew that would happen and I've given that up. And then what's happened is it was said, I don't know, in the press. So, who knows whether it's true or not, about a year ago, that she was told she couldn't be in a television program like Suits. So, so when what Tony and I would do is say, so if, let's just take the word giving something up. If what's the truth, we'd ask them each at a time. We'd say, have a think about it. What do you feel in your whole life you've had to give up?
Yeah.
And so then we'd start to understand that, yes, he might feel like he's given up stuff and she might feel like she's given up stuff, but actually this will be nothing to do with now. It'll have been from past experiences.
So what we normally do is take that like 2 hours worth of stuff we've got on the board, a big chat. We might have asked them some great coaching questions, and then we let them sleep on it, so to speak. And then in the morning after breakfast, we get started. So in that morning, the first thing we do is share some philosophy, and we always share the philosophy around the red and the green world. So that it's like, instead of like trying to sort out their problem, which is like JB said it, is that the problem is always what's the presenting. It's like the surface, because our job as coaches really is to get underneath what's going on, not try and coach the surface issue.
Yeah.
So often when we're in this, he said that, she said that, he's doing this, she's doing that, we're just at the surface level. Yeah. Now you can't solve anything at the surface level. So you're going to get below what's going on. So as we do the philosophy of the red and the green, what happens normally to people is they start to have realizations about themselves. And they start to realize where they're hanging out, mostly emotionally. Mentally and emotionally is where they mostly start to realize about themselves. So I was doing a session the other day with a great couple, who are not a couple, but two separate people, but one was a guy, one was a girl. And I was doing a bit of red and green philosophy. And of course, there starts to be like a dull silence, because they start to learn through the philosophy what they're doing. And, what I tend to do is go, so what emotionality is, really prevalent for you in this? Now, if you were then to go, right, okay, where are they with their emotionality? Now you're underneath the problem, because the problem has initiated the emotionality. But the emotion, we've got to heal or work on the emotionality, not the presenting problem. Because if we work on the presenting problem, what we're going to do is we're going to carry on trying to control everything and everyone and try and then stop doing it. So we remain in the place of the victim. So once we get into the emotionality, now we're working with the individual person. Yeah. So he'd be having his experience. We'd be talking about his emotionality, his negative emotionality that keeps coming to the surface. And then we'd be looking at her negative emotionality that comes to the surface. And what's so amazing when you coach couples is this is where you start to realize that this energy in the guy, his negative emotionality and her negative emotionality often tend to hang out in a sort of a wave band. So they don't necessarily look the same, the patterns, but their patterns of emotionality are nearly always similar. So you're never going to get somebody who's super happy with somebody that's super sad. Like their worlds don't collide. They just don't. So they never meet in the first place. And when that first connection, which, you know, I get it from them, was really like a wham bam, they came and they got really connected, like the two magnets. Yeah, they got so connected. But what's actually happening is that underneath they brought their baggage into this relationship, and their baggage is often emotional baggage, and that emotional baggage is part of what connects them. It's like, yeah, see, you're like me. You know, you're never going to be with someone who's so the opposite to you, really. It doesn't really work. So it's normally like energy, as it's said, attracts like energy. But you could say like emotions attract like emotions. So now we're like on our first morning of our time with them, and they are having realizations which people would never expect to be having about themselves. So you start that journey of them starting to have a developing their person. That's what personal development is. They're starting to learn things about themselves, which, you know, we're not taught at school. You know, don't matter what school you went to, private, the best private schools in the country, or you know, spent whatever, they teach the same stuff, which is really mostly intellectual head stuff. They don't teach you about your emotions or how you work as a creature, or they don't teach any of that. But actually, when we come into a relationship, the animal part of us is meeting the animal part of another person, and the intellectual part is meeting the intellectual part. So there's these different layers, like your spirit, your soul is getting into a relationship with another. You know, you've heard of the term soulmates, you know. So yeah, your souls are getting into a relationship. Your mental state, the way you operate mentally, is getting into a relationship. The way you operate emotionally is getting into a relationship. And then how you physically operate, you're getting into a physical relationship. Yeah. So all these things are happening, which we just have never been taught, never learned about, or whatever. So that's our first gambit, is to teach them some of that and allow them to have realizations about themselves. And then we start asking them loads of questions.
And Sophie's just said, which is really great, because she's saying, which is what you're talking about, is how we deal with it. And what happens is sometimes we tell stories about clients that, or, you know, couples, without mentioning any names or anything. We tell stories because Sophie's saying, I know their stuff is on a different scale, because often we'll tell some quite extreme examples of couples who've got themselves into a, you know, bad state. And she says, I know this stuff is on a different scale, but it makes you look at your own conflicts within your own extended families or friends, and how you handle them as a couple. So definitely makes you question your actions, and there's always one of you leading the decisions, which I think is a good time, because actually it's nearly,
still didn't do the pink and the blue.
Yeah. We've got 8 minutes to go.
So our first gambit is always to do that. We start working on their emotionality. We also work a little bit on their style, their personality styles, how they operate. So they're starting to really learn lots about them. So our whole coaching them is really teach. It's more of a teaching. So I called it an education with coaching thrown in. Yeah. So on day 2, we always then start to talk about the pink and the blue. That's the masculine and feminine energy. Now we always now can relate back to the green and the red, because look, we're going, you can't get your masculine and feminine in balance unless you've moved more towards the green. You're more self-aware. You're more in control of your emotions. Not that they are by that time, but they're aware that they're not. So then when we do the pink and the blue, then it really works. Now, the pink and the blue is sort of much more what we're also seeing this, maybe if we're observing, we're seeing, you know, a little bit of this being out of kilter. So how are we observing that? So look, I think one of the things that I tend to always say is, you know, when you think of the curriculum, because look, the truth is we we're born, and at about 5 years old, 6 years old, we all go to school, and then we do this education for quite a long period of time, don't we? Nowadays we're probably we're definitely into 10 years. I mean, when I was at school, you go at 5 and you finish at 15. So I did 10 years, but now we've got extended education. We're into, like 2 or 3 years at university. So you could be coming out at like 18, 19, maybe even 20 if you do extended time. Now, in that time, we're learning loads and loads of head stuff, but that's sort of thrown on top of the personal experiences we had as a very young child. So this you that comes out at, from into a more, I would say, when you're until you become independent, you're dependent. So, once we leave school and we start to have our own house and pay our own bills and stuff like that, you've moved from being dependent on your parents or whoever brought you up to being independent. Now, it's at that time, so not an easy time in life where we've now got to fend for ourselves. That's the time we're most likely to get into an intimate relationship. Now, if what you observed when you were young, you learnt none of this. So if what you observed was masculine and feminine energy out of kilter, then your masculine and feminine energy is very likely to be out of kilter as well. Now, what I always ask is, think about this, is, when you go to school, is the curriculum, because by the time you're 20, you've spent 3/4 of your life at school. Now, is the curriculum for education, modern education today, is the curriculum more masculine or is the curriculum more feminine? Now, I ask many, many audiences that, and the number one answer is, like, if I get people to shout it out, they all go, it's more masculine. So look, the truth is girls are brought up with a bit of a disadvantage in many ways because they're given so much logical stuff and not much emotional stuff when they're more emotional creatures. So men are more logical, less emotional. Women are more emotional, less logical. But actually, if we teach women to be more like men by giving them a male curriculum, very commonly what happens is that you've now got two humans that have got an excess of masculine energy. And this has all got very complicated over the years. So you could argue, and certainly some people are seeing this, I guess, is, you might ask yourself, so who looks like they're more in charge? Because technically speaking, in the animal part of us, this sort of masculine and feminine, not the logical part, the masculine and feminine part, we always sort of go, look, if it was cavemen, you'd have, man's job, caveman man, I get cave, keep women safe, go hunt, make sure we got a roof over our head, food on the table. Now, obviously we're in 2021. So, but that part of us is still going on. Now, obviously the feminine is much more the nurturer, have support, have the babies, look after the children. So that's like, if we were not humans and we were any other animal on the planet, that's how the other animals operate. Pretty much. There is the odd thing like a seals where the dad has the babies, and that's all a bit weird. But there are not many. There are not many instances where the male and female doesn't work in the way that it does with the vast majority of the animals. So we're no different because we are technically a creature of the planet Earth. So we need to have that masculine and feminine. And because of modern day education, instead of it sort of like masculine and feminine being this sort of dance of energies, we've got two males. And when you put two males together, watch two male deers. In fact, funny enough, we were watching a natural history thing the other day. We were watching giraffes. Well, when the male giraffes, are looking to get a female giraffe and be partners with them, I mean, oh my God, they need to kill each other. I mean, they're mental how they fight. I mean, they haven't exactly got the tools to fight with, have they? But they fight with, they've got these two horns of giraffes, and they were like attacking each other like, no tomorrow. So what happens is when you put two males, even if one's a woman and one's a man and one's a woman, but they're both utilizing their more masculine energy. Because look, the truth is we've all got masculine and feminine energy, but the idea is that women use their feminine energy because that's their primary energy, and men use their masculine energy because that's their primary energy. And if we get that all together, then the magnet is like really solid, yeah. But of course, we're educated in a way where we've actually got a lot of masculine energy going on in modern relationships. And that is, if you're observing that in any way with these poor people, then
who are
then
being
what
observed constantly.
what happened? Yeah, they are. You know, that camera's on them 24/7. It must be hell. Then that will be giving them internal problems. Forget what's going on in their external world. It will give them massive problems because two men will often they'll start to, have a go at each other, really. It's a challenge each other.
Also does, again, we talk a lot about programming, and if you look and see, if a girl has had to be very, like, take care of herself and all that sort of thing, she will grow up to be quite strong and be able to be sort of, quite independent. And so, interestingly, there, as Tony said, there's been so much footage that actually some people have picked out lots and lots of footage where Megan is in the lead. In other words, she's moving. They're going into a building. She's in the lead. They're going to be introduced to somebody. She's in the lead. And interestingly, if you look at the masculine and the feminine, he's obviously did a lot in the service, the army. Was it the army? Yes, because it was William that was in the Air Force, wasn't it? The army. In which case, if you ever saw him in those times, and even since, when he was doing a lot with Invictus and stuff, he was actually very strong and very masculine in his, even if we're just talking about his physical, the way he moved around. But actually what might be interesting, and this is, not a judgment, this is just to observe, might be interesting because, because let's look, all those two generations, because Philip, who, if you believe what you read in, see in those programs about him, he's had to walk, a few steps behind the Queen. And then, one could argue that, the reason why things were difficult sometimes between Charles and Diana, which is a very similar sort of situation, whereby Charles just perhaps wasn't strong enough in his masculinity. And we're talking about very healthy strength. We're not talking about unhealthy strength. And we could be seeing the same thing here with Harry just not being quite as strong as he was as a single man with someone who's a very strong woman. And I think that to finish off, because it's now
we've gone past our time.
Gone past our time. Just to tidy up, is that actually, as you can hear, we, especially when we're working with couples, but just to look at this as an example tonight, is to just observe and go, look, they're all of them, all of us, all of you, we're all doing the best we can with the resources we've got. And so sometimes we go into the intimate relationship part of our life, very difficult to make that work if we're coming at it having had patterns of behavior that actually don't fit together that well.
We've got no education on the one hand about any of this. Nobody taught us how to be in a relationship at school. And so we've got very little information or knowledge or understanding of how it all works. So we are destined in many ways. And bless, if I look at my family, I think that it's only my brother that with my mum, we always said she answered the phone like the Queen. She lived, she got a 60th wedding anniversary. She got a letter from the Queen, like you do if you get to 100. It's a nice picture of the Queen. And when I was little, I always said my mum looked a bit like the Queen. And when she answered the phone, she went very posh. It was very like the bouquet woman. She always says hello, and I'm going, what, you sound like the Queen when you answer the phone, but you don't do that when you're talking to me. So it's quite funny. But yeah, obviously, why was I sharing that? I've forgotten it.
Because we were just basically saying that everyone is bringing their own patterns to the relationship. Couple of things.
Go on,
because obviously we've definitely got the right subject here, and we've now got a subject for next week if we want to. First of all, Nigel Irving, serious question. How do seals do in their relationship? So I think if you could just, do you know that? Do you know how seals operate?
Well, yes, I do. What does he want to know?
Well, because you were going on about giraffes, then saw, and then you were talking about other animals. Oh, you were talking about the horsefish, what they call
seahorses.
Seahorses.
The man has the babies. Yeah.
I'm so good at this. Horsefish. He wants to know about seals, and then
David Attenborough. He's your man. He's your man. You need to ask him. But anyway, yes.
Okay, and then Richard is saying there seems to be a plan to remove all sexuality from society. The norm appears to be asexual, LGBT being prescribed as the only normal. I said, Richard, that is definitely a can of worms moment.
Yeah, indeed.
So I think it's a good time to finish.
Well, it is, and I think that would
There's
be.
no way Tony V's not going to have a say about that.
I'm going to try not to say anything, but no, you're absolutely right, Richard. It is an interesting situation. So why don't we cover that next week? Honestly, I believe that this is a massive challenge for humans, certainly Western humans right now, that we are going down this pathway, which is a pathway of discovery. Because look, whenever we do anything that's not working, it's an opportunity to learn what doesn't work. So just like, Meghan and Harry and, all the royal family and all the people around all of this is an opportunity to learn and grow, to find out what does work. What they're finding out is very much what doesn't work. But of course, what we're doing is we're arguing about it at as we sort of call a surface level, as Julie greatly said. But what we're not doing is we're not digging down as to what's really going on here, which is a subject that, most of us know nothing about. So I believe that the logic has got, into this whole masculine feminine thing. Logic is taking over. But what we're not doing is we're not considering all aspects of our humanness. We're only studying it from one level, and it's multi-layered. Yeah. So it's a bit like playing a game of chess versus playing a game of what they call 3D chess, where you have three boards on top of each other. Yeah. So there's like layers. And so what we're doing is, because we've not got the education of the other layers, we're just playing one game without really realizing this game is much more complicated than what we thought. And of course, then we've all got an opinion. We've all, got some bias. We've all got, we're all in judgment. We're all blaming each other and saying it should be this, it should be that. So yeah, it's the way of the world right now, where humans are getting the opportunity to really look at themselves and go, yeah, okay, maybe some of this isn't working, but we have to go down the slippery path to find out that it doesn't work, to be able to come back up the path and go, yeah, we tried that. That actually didn't work too well.
And just to finish off, well, of course, Nigel's going, but honestly, please tell me about seals. Nigel Irving, stop it.
Yes.
But I want.
What about Wales? I can tell you about Wales, and not the Prince of Wales, but Wales. Because they're obviously mammals, and it's very, very interesting. We've seen, obviously.
You're not going to say about when we saw that we were. Yes, don't.
Anyway,
no,
next week.
Next week.
Seals
but I wanted
aren't
to say
unsimilar.
Thank you so much for the people that have been on, and we have had likes we've had likes from Naomi Bryan.
Fabulous, Naomi.
We've had loves and hearts from Pamela Mazingo.
Oh, fantastic.
Pamela, what a name from the past. Yes. Natalie Deegan.
Come on, Natalie.
New person in our life, and Sophie Bullivant, of
Fantastic.
course.
Well, thank you for
some people that we haven't met before. People like the gentleman that just Richard. So
fantastic.
He's saying I fully agree. And Nigel saying, loving this. Please keep it up every week. We will do our best.
So
and I have promised that we will talk about that subject next week.
What did Richard call it?
What?
I need a deep copy of what Richard said, because he framed it up brilliant.
He said, plan to remove sexuality from society so that the norm appears to be asexual, LGBT being prescribed as the only normal.
Yes.
Contentious stuff, Richard
I think that's
Williams.
fantastic. We will definitely talk about asexuality next week, because it's a very, very, very interesting subject, which if we could learn a bit about it, you wouldn't get, some of this stuff would go away. There's no doubt at all about it, but we just haven't got the education. We're too in our heads.
I've thought of a great title for it next week. Asexuality or sexuality? ?
Yes. Okay. We might well go for that then. If we remember, we'll get to Saturday going, what did we say we were going to talk about? Richard, we'll have to talk to Richard.
We will.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for being amazing.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next Saturday.
Have a great rest of your Saturday night, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, have a great rest of the weekend, and see you 7 o'clock, same time next week. Bye for now.